Good morning. I'm Rosalie Schaefer, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County, I welcome you to our hot topic today. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize a former public official in our audience, Barbara Harvey, long-term member of the school board. Will you please stand up? And I would like to welcome here all the dedicated guardians at Lightham. Would you please stand up? Wonderful. Today we will talk about an issue that is not only of concern to the public, but it goes to the very heart of our human values, the protection of innocent, helpless children. We've all seen the heartbreaking photos of Jania Thomas, who was subjected to long-term abuse before her eventual murder. Yet little was done until her body was found. After she was drowned in her bathroom, she was unceremoniously dumped into a freezer and passed off as meat for storage. But she was just one of many children in Florida who have been abused or killed by those who are supposed to be taking care of them. Our speakers today will talk about their work in preventing these crimes, the rules they must follow, and how the current system works. They will also tell us how the system doesn't work well and what can be done to make it work better to save more children at risk. We are very pleased to have with us today Gigi Kelly, Chief Operations Officer, Manatee Children's Services, Lucia Branton, Director of External Affairs, Safe Children Coalition, and Connie Shingeldecker, Investigative Bureau Chief, Manatee County Sheriff. After their presentations, we will also have Nancy Sanders give a brief discussion about the guardians at Lightham, and then we will take questions from the audience. When we get to that part, please use the microphone on the floor and state your name and then your question.
I think it's officially afternoon, so I'll say good afternoon. I've been asked to adjust it so it's not in front of my face. I have a lot of material to go over here with everyone today, and so I'm hoping that if you have questions, we can, as a panel, try to answer them. I guess if there's any burning questions, we will try to answer them even before then. I'm going to start off with an overview of what is happening related to abuse and neglect in Manatee County. We have a total of 38 child protective investigators and 7 child protective investigative supervisors that, through a contract with the Department of Children and Families and by state statute, the Sheriff's Department does perform child protective investigations and has done so since 1997. In 2015, we had a turnover rate of 39.5%. We lost 15 of our child protective investigators, 4 in the month of September alone. And that does play a role in our ability to go out and effectively investigate these cases when almost half of your workforce is new and is in training. In 2015, over 4,300 reports were made to the hotline for Manatee County alone. So those 4,300 or over 4,300 cases were handled by the child protective investigators here in Manatee County, going out and performing that level of investigation. Of those cases that we closed during 2015, 22% were verified. That means that there was a verified finding of abuse or neglect or abandonment. 41% of those that were closed were not substantiated, which means that there was not enough to verify, but there were some concerns. And 37% had no findings, meaning that they were not abuse or neglect. The top 5 allegations or reasons, and do understand that there generally are multiple coexisting factors, but in trying to decipher what are the top reasons we verified for abuse and neglect or abandonment, 26% was substance misuse, and 25% was family violence, and then 14% inadequate supervision, and 9% was physical injury, and 7% threatened harm. And if you added all those up, they would add up to more than 100%, because as I said, there are many that have multiple coexisting issues. We sheltered 652 children in 2015. That is the highest number of children we have ever sheltered in a one-year period. 352 cases, 652 children. So what that tells us is that those are 352 individual cases resulting in 652 children sheltered. So that's multiple children in one family. Some of those families in 2015 had 5, 6, and 7 children. It was an unbelievable year for us with that type of situation. And I am so happy to see so many guardian ad litems here today, because there were 150 children from those 652 that were removed that had no guardian representation. And so I'm so happy to know that you've stepped up to the plate and answered the call, and that we've got more guardians available to those children. Of those 652 children sheltered, I want you to know that that was an 8% of the reports resulted in sheltering. In other words, remember, we had 4,300 reports to the hotline. 8% of those 4,300 resulted in sheltering. But that is an increase. Our average had been 4% up until 2014. Then it jumped to 6%. And now we have an 8% increase. We have an 8% as a result of 2015. So it increased even more in 2015. 56% of the children that we sheltered were 5 or younger, and I think that's important for you all to know the ages of these children that we are putting in shelter. They're 5 or younger because those are your most vulnerable. But I would like to make a strong statement. We saved 652 lives last year. Just understand that. The fact that those children have been removed, are in a safe place, that's 652 children that are alive that might not otherwise be. One thing we do know for sure, we'll never know the lives we save, only the ones we don't. And so now we're going to start looking at some of these issues pertaining to sheltering, and then we'll talk a little bit later about the death cases. The top reason that we sheltered, number 1, was alcohol drug abuse. 46% of our children that sheltered, remember there's 652 that were sheltered, 46% of those children was the result of drugs or alcohol misuse by the caregiver. 26% were inadequate supervision, 18% were family violence, and 14% were physical abuse. 54% of all of these children removed were exposed to multiple verified findings of abuse, neglect, abandonment, or exploitation. Many of you probably read the papers, and you know that we had a heroin epidemic in 2015, correct? You all, I'm seeing some heads nod, yes. Well, in 2015, we had 561 overdoses, with 57 people dying as a result of those overdose deaths, those overdoses. 56 persons had repeat overdoses. So some individuals were overdosing multiple times in one day. They would get a hit of heroin, they would overdose, they would get a Narcan injection or nasal spray, it would bring them back, and that same day they would go back out and take another hit of heroin and overdose again. The ages most common that was affected with this heroin issue were 20 to 39, childbearing years for certain. Many, many children were affected by that. I'm happy to say that we've turned the corner. We did Narcan in excess of 1,300 administrations, and that was the fire rescue EMS folks. But we've turned the corner. The numbers in the last 3 months of 2015 were lower than what we were in 2014 with overdoses. They decreased by 47% in October, 43% in November, and down 60% in December. So we really do think that we're making some great strides. Public awareness, getting the drugs off the street, and putting people in jail and so forth. So we've really turned the corner. And I do mention here that guardian ad litems are still very needed in our community because of the large number of children that we've sheltered. In 2000 to 2015, I went back and I looked at all the child death cases that I could get my hands on related to physical abuse injury. From 2000 to 2015, we had a total of 8 children that died as a result of physical abuse injury. In 2008, we had 1 child. In 2009, we had 1 child. In 2010, we had 1 child. In 2012, we had 1 child. 2015, 4. 4 children died of physical abuse injury in 2015. It was an extremely unusual year because, as I said, I went back to 2000 to 2015, and I just told you the years in which we had physical abuse injury child deaths. 7 of those 8 were head injuries. What's the one anomaly that we have? Janiyah. But 7 of those 8 were head injuries. Now I'm going to just talk about head injuries for a moment because that's the core of what we're looking at. All head injury cases were to children under the age of 5. How old was Janiyah? She was 11. 7 of our head injury cases, all of them, were under age 5. 6 were 2 or younger. They can't communicate what's happening to them most of the time. 6 were 2 or younger. 6 were male perpetrators. So of those 7 head injury cases, 6 of them were male perpetrators. All were boyfriends. All were boyfriends. 5 of the victims were male, 2 were female of those head injury cases. So, if there's child protective people in the audience, I think that's important to know. If there's law enforcement people in the audience, I think that's important to know. Because again, we're looking at our most vulnerable. If we just looked at 2015, there were 11 cases of child death reported to the hotline that we investigated. 11. 2 were medical, 2 were unsafe sleep, 1 was hit by a car, 1 was a drowning, and 1 died tragically in a home elevator accident. 4 were the result of physical abuse injury, all resulting in arrests. 3 of those were head injury cases. 1 was not, that's Janiyah. All were male victims. All were male victims of the head injury cases. And all of those children were under the age of 5. 1 child tragically died on his 4th birthday. All perpetrators were mom's boyfriend while mom was at work. 2 were working in the evening, 1 was working during the daytime. So we have Janiyah Thomas, age 11, physical injury, abuse by mom, and quite likely, it's not definitive that it was drowning, but very possible that that was a contributing factor as well. 2 of the 4 child death cases resulting in physical abuse and injury in 2015, 2 had prior DCFs contact, 2 did not. So when we talk about prevention efforts, I do want to mention that I want to go back and mention something else. Because what I did was I took a look at all of the child deaths roughly from 2015, or excuse me, 2005 to 2015. And I wanted to kind of give you an overview as we talk about a little bit about prevention. 33, and these are preventable deaths. Many of these never result in criminal prosecution because they are not the result necessarily of abuse and neglect, but they still come to us to be investigated. 33 infants died from unsafe sleep from 2005 to 2015. Those are preventable deaths. 10 toddler drownings that were preventable, and 2 autistic children, I think both were age 7, 5 or one was age 5 and one was age 7. So that's a total of 12 drownings that were preventable from 2005 to 2015. And we had 5 overdose. In closing, I'm going to talk a little bit about prevention efforts. It's important for people to call the hotline. And we have the number 1-800-962-2873. And I also want to mention that since we've talked about the who's watching your child is a trifold handout that I have at the back of the room, because the children that died in 2014, 3 of those with head injuries, and as I mentioned, 8 head injury cases, pretty much head injury cases. This is a trifold that's going to give a mother or a caregiver information about who's watching your child and the red flags that you should be looking for. Children who live with adults not related to them are nearly 50 times as likely to die of inflicted injuries as children living with 2 biological parents. Many children who die from physical abuse are killed by mothers' boyfriends. So this is aimed at educating mothers about the red flags to look for, whether it's their partner or a babysitter who's watching their children. If I think I'm out of time, are you telling me I'm out of time? Then I won't have an opportunity to talk a little bit about when we remove children, but as we move forward, if I'm given the opportunity, I'll be happy to speak on that. Okay.
Good afternoon. I see very familiar faces out there. My name is Lucia Branton, and I work for the Sarasota YMCA, which is the lead agency for the Safe Children Coalition. Other than the Guardians, is anyone familiar with our program? No. Okay. Many years ago, back in probably 1996, the Department of Children and Families partnered with the Sarasota Y to privatize child welfare. So HRS went away. We felt that things could be done of a better quality, lower caseloads, more time with the children and the families. So the YMCA holds the contract under the Department of Children and Families to provide the child welfare services. And the Safe Children Coalition is primarily made up of service organizations. So under the YMCA, we have case management agencies, Pathways, Centerstone, and Youth and Family Alternatives that have case managers who actually do the work with the children and the families when they come in. So the only way we actually get a case is when it comes through to the abuse hotline, and investigations brings it to us. We provide case management services. We also do licensure for traditional foster homes. We provide adoption services and independent living services, independent living being for youth that transition out of foster care. And now with the new statute, they can remain in foster care until the age of 23. We provide housing and their basic needs while they focus on education is really the goal. We have two types of cases. We have judicial cases where the court is involved, and we have court-appointed guardians ad litem, and they work a formal case plan to work toward a certain goal, typically reunification. And then we have non-judicial cases which come in as well. They're not at the level of acuity that would warrant a removal of the child, but we still assign a case manager. We provide a plan for the family to work to obtain services, and it's very short-term. Typically, there's 1 or 2 things a family needs to make them stronger and more able to function at a better level to keep the children safe, be better parents. And we do that for about 3 to 4 months, and then we pull out. Hopefully, we've left the family in a stronger state than when they came in. So our work is governed by statutes 39 and 409, and then we have the Department of Children and Families operating procedures, which we have to follow, and then our internal policies and procedures. So by statute, the primary goal in these cases is reunification. We always strive to make families unify in a stronger state than when they came in. We work with service providers in the community, which you'll hear from shortly, to really hone in on what the family needs and provide those services and hopefully see them grow during a period of time to negate the issues that led the case to come to us from the start. When reunification cannot happen, the second goal we have to look at by law is adoption. And that could be adoption through a family member, that could be a non-relative adoption, and we have a process that we go through to try to match the child with a family. Typically, people think, we want the child to acclimate to a family, but we're really searching for a family to acclimate to that child. We want to find the family that will best suit that child's needs. The third goal we look at is permanent guardianship, and the biggest difference, obviously, with that is we don't terminate parental rights when we go towards the permanent guardianship role or goal. We look to family, any natural relationships or connections that the child may have, whether it's with a relative or with a school coach or a teacher or someone they might know in the community. We try to look to them as possible caregivers very early on in the case so that there's less trauma to the child. And then, of course, we have extended foster care, which is the group of kids that transition out of foster care at age 18 who never get reunified, who we have not been able to establish a permanent guardianship relationship, and for one reason or another, adoption was not the appropriate goal for them. Most of our children are let me go back a little bit just to give you a little idea of some of our demographics. We had, as of February 3rd, 1,352 children in our Tri-County area that we serve. So we serve Manatee, Sarasota, and DeSoto counties. The majority of those children are Manatee County children. 46 of those children are in extended foster care. So they are living independently in the community with financial support from us to be able to either they're living in a foster home or they have gone into the independent living program, which they get a monthly stipend to offset the cost of living while they focus on their education. So they're either attending college or university or a technical institute to hopefully achieve their goal. We have very strong outcomes in high school graduation or GED achievements. We're very proud of that. Most of our kids are in a post-secondary setting, and we are very proud to be able to have good relationships with USF and State College of Florida and the technical institutes to be able to call them on a first name basis and say, so-and-so's starting this fall, can you please, make sure that, you mark on your folder that he is transitioning from foster care. We have to work as a team here to make sure he knows how to navigate the system because it's very confusing for our children. Sadly enough, though, most of our kids come in and they are 3 to 5 years behind academically because of the trauma that they've endured in their life. And they're about 3 to 5 years behind emotionally. So when you have the profile of a non-traumatized 18-year-old and you have an 18-year-old who has gone through what we see every day, they look very different. The good news is with the right services and time and commitment from a team, you can reverse a lot of that trauma. And that's, I think, what keeps us going every day, is that we know that it is reversible, they can change, and we've seen it. And so we really strongly believe in that. We have 153 children that are free for adoption. The majority of them have not had an identified home. And of those, most of them are Caucasian. Does that surprise you? Yeah. Most of them are, they have some sort of developmental delay or they're a large sibling group. And we try to keep the siblings together in order to find permanency. And I'm being cut off, so that's it for now. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for coming out this chilly day and hear about this important issue. My name is Gigi Kelly, and I'm one of the few in my age group that don't need glasses to read, so I'm going to take them off. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Manatee Children's Services, and I brought my colleagues Melinda Thompson. She's our Chief Executive Officer, and Cheryl Andrews is our Clinical Director, and they may pop in and answer questions as we progress through. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, there's been references made to prevention programs. How many of you have heard of Manatee Children's Services? Good, very good. I'm glad to hear that. We've been around since 1977, not me specifically, but our founder, Carol Chamberlain, who used to work for HRS. She would go out and investigate cases of abuse, and back in the late 70s, she found herself driving as far away as Tampa to find housing for children that had been abused that she had to remove on her own, by the way, didn't go out with law enforcement. And she was determined to change that. She wanted our kids to stay in our community. So she and a group that she gathered together carried momentum, incorporated our agency, and I'm proud to tell you that not only did she open our community's first shelter in 1979, but another huge development in our progress as a child abuse prevention and intervention agency is last month. Our agency became nationally accredited by the National Children's Alliance as our community's Child Advocacy Center, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what that means for us and kids in our community. As I had mentioned, Manatee Children's Services has been in existence since 1977, providing our community with child abuse prevention, intervention, residential, and treatment services. I'm proud to announce that this past January, as I mentioned, that we became nationally accredited by the National Children's Alliance following an extensive application and review process. As the accrediting agency, Children's Advocacy Centers, NCA awards various levels of accreditation and membership to centers responding to allegations of child abuse in ways that are effective and efficient and put the needs of child victims first. Because of this designation, MCS is expanding services to better meet the full spectrum of child victim needs, of service population that we provide services to that amount to over 14,000 kids a year. And to kind of put a flow to that number, I'm going to walk you through what could conceivably happen and how we respond to a child victim. MCS's Child Advocacy Center services are streamlined as this following example highlights. A teen victim is identified during MCS's Kids Personal Safety Program child abuse prevention presentation. When she discloses that her mother's boyfriend is sexually abusing her, the kid's advocate calls in the disclosure to the Florida Abuse Hotline that Connie referred to, who then refers the case to Manatee County Sheriff's Office Child Protective Investigations. Upon investigation, the law enforcement may determine that forensic services are needed, and they bring that child to our SCAN program. And while there, the child is provided with a non-leading forensic interview and a medical exam by a state-certified pediatrician on site at our program. When the child arrives, an MCS advocate begins the process of walking the child and family members through the investigation procedure and completes a plan of service for that child. Upon conclusion of the forensic services, it may be determined that the teen needs to be removed from her home and could be placed in Manatee Children's Services emergency shelter. While there, she will receive crisis intervention counseling, safety planning, and other support services as identified as needed by the advocate. Additionally, the youth participates in MCS's Truth Program, a pregnancy prevention program, because child abuse victims are 25% more likely to become teen parents. During this time, her mother is could be court-ordered into Manatee Children's Services BRIC parenting program for parent education in order to work towards reunification. While in the shelter, a grandparent of the child may be identified as a placement option, and the child is able to move in with her. While living with her grandmother, they both are provided crisis intervention counseling and other support services such as securing food, clothing, etc., to preserve that placement rather than see the child go into foster care. While in the grandmother's care, if the child begins to have symptoms such as nightmares, she could be referred to MCS's sexual abuse treatment counselor in order to receive trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and continues the process of healing. Manatee Children's Services Child Advocacy Center is modeled after a best practice provision framework endorsed by the National Children's Alliance. These services have demonstrated that the use of child advocacy centers and their multidisciplinary teams have resulted in increased successful prosecutions of child perpetrators. Child advocacy centers are efficient, providing a significantly higher rate of coordinated investigations of abuse. Child advocacy centers help victims heal. Child victims of sexual abuse who receive services at a CAC are 4 times more likely to receive forensic medical exams and mental health treatment that children in non-CAC communities get. Research demonstrates that caregivers in CAC cases are more satisfied with the investigation than non-CAC comparison sites. 97% of parents would tell others to seek help at a CAC. CAC accreditation through the National Children's Alliance assures the highest standard of cost-saving care is provided to child victims. And so we're very proud to be a part of that in our community. Child abuse is a multifaceted problem. Connie mentioned substance abuse being a huge problem in our community and throughout our country. Manatee Children's Services has provided a variety of services to address the problem of child abuse, and we look to expand and enhance now as our community's CAC to include additional victim advocates. It's very difficult to begin the healing process if you're worried about what you're going to eat or where you're going to live the next day. So we really need advocates to be there and guide the child and their family through this very huge stream that they're bombarded with when they enter into the investigation process. We also plan on enhancing our parenting program to provide even more support. Parents that graduate our BRIC parenting program, our advocates, we plan our advocates to go out and do home visits after graduation and after reunification with their children to make sure that everything is going smoothly in that very stressful and tenuous transition process. So I've given you a bit of an overview of what we do and what we plan to do in the future, and I'd be glad to answer any other questions you may have about prevention. Thank you.
And now we call upon Nancy Sanders to talk to us about the Guardian Ad Litem program. You have 5 minutes.
I wasn't even going to take that long. Thank you. I need my little sign, though. Let me get my sign. That's not part of my 5 minutes. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this symposium today, because a lot of you are getting information you may or may not have been aware of. And I'd also like to thank the press, who has made known the tremendous need, particularly in Manatee County, as to the guardian ad litems that are required to meet with the children. If you're not familiar with guardian ad litem, we get involved with the children once they have been removed from their families, and the court has determined that they need an extra set of eyes to watch out for their best interests. We meet with the children at least once a month, and that way they can't get lost in any one system. You've heard a lot here this morning, and as you can see, I'm sure, there are a number of pieces to the puzzle that are necessary for us to protect our children. Every single one of you in this room is a part of that puzzle. The individuals, members of organizations, the press, everyone here is a part of that puzzle, and that's why you're here today. If you're interested in becoming a guardian, we do have some information set on the table in the back, and I also have our address, 12gal.org. That's the best place for you to get information. It gives you the job description of a guardian, and there's also a place on there where you can indicate if you're interested in serving in Sarasota, Manatee, or DeSoto County. Those 3 counties make up our 12th Judicial Circuit. So I'm hoping that each of you will become a piece of the puzzle that will be effective in working toward the benefit of our children. And I'd also like to introduce our new executive director for the 12th Judicial Circuit. Tony, if you could stand, please. Tony Latortu. Thank you. Thank you. Tony has just been introduced to the press in kind of a surprising manner as a result of the articles that Richard Diamond wrote for the Bradenton Herald, and I could not believe the placement when I picked it up last Sunday morning and saw it was the lead story above the fold. It was incredible. We've received about 90 inquiries in a period of 1 week. Now, all of those people will not become guardians because some might find it's too intense, some might find it's too time-consuming, some might not be here long enough during the year to be able to be an effective guardian, but every single one of those people that has contacted us has something that they can do for us. Another wonderful contact that we've just made this morning is with Charles Clapsaddle, who's back there manning his camera. He would like to do a series for the guardian ad litem, and I'm going to pull in all these other groups as well because we're all pieces of the puzzle. He is with Manatee Educational TV, and we talked a few moments ago about putting together a series to benefit the children of Manatee County. So I see nothing but good coming out of this meeting. So again, thank you, League of Women Voters. Thank all of you for being here. Don't forget to pick up information in the back, and also 12gal.org. Thank you.
And thank you, Nancy, and all your team workers here. They're doing a great job. And now we're ready to take questions from our audience. And you may use the microphone over on the floor, state your name, and tell us which panel member you would like to direct your question to, or whether it will be to all of them. And please limit your commentary so that more people can ask more questions. And I will take the moderator's option for asking the first question. Ms. Shingledecker, what aspects and legal grounds do you have when considering removing a child from the home? What is your authority and indicators?
Well, our legal authority is Florida State Statute, Chapter 39. And essentially, it states that a child may be taken into custody pursuant to the provisions of this part and based upon sworn testimony by a law enforcement officer or an agent, which is a child protective investigator. And that's, again, if probable cause supports that a child has been abused, neglected, or abandoned, or is suffering from or is in imminent danger of illness or injury as a result of abuse, neglect, or abandonment. So certainly, as soon as we come into contact with the child, we're going to have to make some determinations, but the child protective investigator has an entire statute that they're dealing with, as well as the training that they've received and their orders that they have to follow. So they have a requirement of investigating and seeing all the children in the home, interacting with the caregiver, trying to determine if it's an injury, if it was the result of abuse, neglect, or if it was an accident. So there's a lot of investigation that has to take place. Law enforcement is going out jointly, and they're performing a criminal investigation at the same time. So the child protective investigator is looking at the dependency issue. If this child is not safe in this situation, if we can't guarantee the child's safety in that situation, then if we have probable cause, we will remove that child if we have to. Sometimes we can leave a child in the home setting if the perpetrator, or this person we believe to be the perpetrator, removes themselves. In other words, if they leave the home and then that leaves the environment safer. If we feel that the what we call the non-offending caregiver is protective. So sometimes you're going to be looking at the prior circumstances to determine what's the history of the family, how protective has that parent been in the past, what kinds of situations have we seen in the past. So I hope that that's helped answer the question, but it is based upon state statute. When we do remove a child, we have to immediately go before a judge within so many hours, 24 hours. So the judge will review that information and determine if, in fact, we have enough to shelter that child or continue to keep that child out of the home setting. If they don't think that we do, then the child has to be returned. So it's not just a willy-nilly decision. It's going to be based upon probable cause, very much like an arrest of an individual will be based upon probable cause.
Yes, my name's Karen Hack. I'm guardian ad litem. I'm not sure who to direct it to on the panel. What kind of contact did Jania's family have with the state of Florida or its agents before her death? Was there contact, any intervention with her family? And if so, what happened? Why was it followed up? The second part of that question is, it was mentioned about the privatization of in 1997. Is all of Florida privatized, and has there been a decrease since the privatization in the number of abuse cases in the state of Florida? Thanks.
Yes, in the Jania Thomas case, and I think that there's a CERT report out that was in the newspaper and everyone has access. It's online with the Department of Children and Families, and you're welcome to go and look at that report. It has certain recommendations, and there are certain things that the Manatee County Sheriff's Office has immediately taken action on. But yes, there were priors involving that family, and in one particular prior to Jania even being born, there was a child that was removed. So yes, there was activity, and there wasn't a verified abuse neglect with a child removed before Jania was born. I don't want to get too terribly involved in speaking about that specific case. As I said, the CERT report is out there. There have been many recommendations that came from that report. We are still looking at some of the issues within our own agency as to what exactly the investigators did or did not, if everything that if they did was what they should have done, and then we're looking to take any action if that tells us that there were actions that they did not take. So we're not really in a position where we can talk specifically about any of those issues right now. But yes, there were priors, and yes, our agency was involved in that, and we're looking more specifically in dealing with if there were problems with dealing with those specific problems.
To answer the second part of your question, yes, every county in the state of Florida is now privatized because of the outcome measurements were very positive. No, we don't necessarily have less cases. I've been with the coalition now for 18 years, and it ebbs and flows. I would have to say in the last probably 8 months, we have had a 200% case growth than we've seen in probably the last 3 years. for various reasons, a lot of what Major went into. And the profile of the kids that we're getting today are much more intense than the children I served as a case manager back in 97, 96. And they're more complex and they're intergenerational. So we're seeing a lot of children that I was the case manager for having children, and they're coming into care and needing services. So it ebbs and flows with whatever the culture is out in society at the moment.
My name is Helen Githens, and I am also a guardian ad litem. And I have a question for you, Lucia. You were speaking about adoption, and you mentioned about 153 children that are free to be adopted.
Yes.
Can you speak to that just a little bit as far as what are the chances of them being adopted? About how long does it take, and what are the key factors that make it challenging?
Yeah, the key challenges are there. Many of them are that are not in identified homes are sibling groups, and it's tough to find a family that can accommodate all of the children and their needs. Some of them are African American, and that is a reality that African American children, especially adolescents, which most of those kids are that are free for adoption, they're more challenging to adopt out. We don't have we have beautiful children, but we don't have the traditional, blonde hair, blue-eyed child. Our children come in with needs, and they don't always come in at infancy, and they're not always available for adoption at infancy. So we work really hard to filter out the families that want to adopt because they can't afford adoption through private entities. There's virtually no cost to our families who adopt through us. However, they come with challenges, and we really work to filter out those people that are doing it for the wrong reasons, if I should say. Those that it's not to feed something within themselves that they're missing, it's really to serve the child and to find a forever family for that child, that when things get tough, 5-10 years from now, when they're going through puberty and all the emotional struggles that go through it, and they're having those those memories or whatever it might be, clinicians could speak better to that they're not going to give up on this child, that when you adopt a child, it's forever, and that's the way it needs to be. So we're very careful about who we select to go through our classes. I believe you have to go to the mic, sir. I'm sorry. There's one ahead of you. Yes.
Yes, and earlier, I'm Kyle Quattlebaum, guardian ad litem. And an earlier speaker mentioned the fact that there was a high turnover experience during this past period. And in the years that we've been guardians, that's been the case with case management as well as CPF. And I'm wondering what might be done to solve those problems. When we've had a child for several years, as has happened, we'll wind up with 3 or 4 case managers involved with that. And our legislature is in session right now, and we're very aware of the fact from the Guardian publications that there's an effort to try to get funding for new programs. What would you say would be most beneficial in reducing turnover among the various programs that deal with children?
In my professional opinion and experience, more money doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stay. Social services is a very challenging field. You go into it for more reasons than monetary. We have done polls with staff that have left over the years, and money is not the number one reason they leave. It's the stress, it's the toll that it takes on them emotionally. It's the hard work, the long hours, the nature of what they see every day, and the expectations for the position are very high. There is a lot of stress and pressure that's put on social workers to people think that they can look into a crystal ball and predict what happens, and I think people forget that humans are fallible. We cannot predict what a person will do. We cannot predict the outcome of what a family will do 1 to 5 years from now after you spent the last 18 months serving them and they did everything right. and it's very hard. It takes a toll, and I do believe just the nature of the beast is that it's time limited to what a person can do. Some of us sitting here today have done this for a very long time, and I don't know if we're just crazy or or what, but I tell you, it's very unique, and it takes a balance. But when I tell you, we've wanted to know the answer to that as well, so we took it upon ourselves to survey that, and it is not that reason. It's not the money.
You don't need more money.
No, we need money for the families and the services, yes, absolutely, because like I said, we had, through the months of September, October, November, we typically remove about 30, 35 children a month average. Since September, we've removed at least 100 children. That's a huge influx in our system, and it backs our service providers up. The substance abuse treatment programs, the mental health treatment programs, the family violence programs, the parenting programs are all on an influx because they can't handle the number of kids coming into care and the number of families that are servicing. So yes, we do need the money because they need it to open more doors and take our referrals.
That's an interesting response. Is it not true, I'm working under this assumption from prior discussions, that if the caseloads were smaller, if there were more agents to do the work, that the stress would be reduced and that they might be better able to deal with it? Is that not true, in your opinion?
Our caseloads are not very high when we're looking at the average case manager having 15 to 17 cases. You can have 5 cases. In one case, one family can take up 30 hours of your week. And I've been there and done that. So it's all relative to what you're getting.
And I just would like to say that we've tried to identify what the cause of our turnover rate is, and we're looking to see, are we identifying, because we're looking at when are we losing them? Are we losing someone that's only been on for a short period of time? Are we losing someone that's been on for years? And we're losing that in many of our, from those 15 that I told you we lost in 2015, many of them hadn't been on a full year. So what we're looking at is, are we identifying up front the people that we're hiring and bringing into the system? Are we identifying the right person for the job? And that's where I think you really have to invest a lot of effort in trying to determine if that's the right person for the job. Remember when when people couldn't get a job, we had lawyers coming to become child protective investigators. We had people that had been a colonel in the military or some high-ranking official in the military come to work to be a child protective investigator. And I'd sit across the desk from these people and I'd say, are you prepared to work the hardest you've ever worked, to work long hours, to take orders from someone that probably doesn't have the level of education perhaps that you've got, and all of those, oh yes, absolutely. And later on, those people would come back and say, you know what, you were right. This is the hardest job I've ever worked. I wasn't really prepared to work the hours and to go into the worst homes in Manatee County, see the worst of the worst. So I think we've got to really try to identify that person up front in the hiring process so that we can not waste our time with someone that's not, that's going to leave us after a year. We're spinning our wheels. We're taking all this time to invest, getting them trained. They're going out. They're starting to get a caseload. Maybe they'll work that caseload for 6 months, 8 months, and then they'll go, this is not for me. We want to try to get that person identified and realizing that up front. So I think ride-alongs, going out and being able to do a ride-along maybe for an entire day, seeing what it's like to remove a child, that's a very traumatic situation to be involved in. And we've removed 652 children in 1 year. So that takes the toll on a lot of the employees that are working there. It's very stressful. So we are putting some efforts up front into trying to prioritize and look at those folks. And I wish there was a silver bullet or a crystal ball or a test that you could give them that would help identify, but we haven't really found that yet. Yes, sir.
Just a couple of brief comments. My name is Dick Hunt. I'm a guardian ad litem, and regarding adoptions, and in my experience and comments about multiple children, siblings together, when you get toward the end of the case, they're getting people coming in to be adopted and looking at them. Sometimes the family finders or the services will say, we found somebody that's for that, and that's great, I've found from experience that that second set of eyes, like a guardian ad litem, going out to and saying, well, it's not over yet. Let's go out and see what this person is like and if they're going to be a good fit, just from our perspective, you know. And I found out in my experiences, by going out there and interviewing them, they may not have been, there might be somebody else who might make a better fit for these children. So, and just present those facts to the organizations and broaden the search a little bit more, and then you find a little more acceptable, something that's going to stick, or it's going to be in the best interest of the child. That's what our really main concern is. That's my experience, though, is that we shouldn't just, all of a sudden they found somebody and they think, okay, that's it. Do your own investigation as a guardian ad litem, and you will, as a second set of eyes, and you probably, maybe you'll come to the same conclusion, but at least you'll know that it's good placement, but sometimes it may not be. Thank you so much.
My name is Gene Schulze. I'm a guardian ad litem here in Manatee. I got 3 questions. One is, there's a lot of controversy about privatization, and I noticed that question came up here. I want to point out, as somebody who's worked for a private organization in the children's services for 45 years up in Connecticut, there is a difference between profit-making and nonprofit organizations when it comes to privatization. You may want to comment on that.
We're a non-for-profit 501(c)(3), excuse me.
Okay. My second question is, as we look for resources for these families, have you come across an organization called Free Cycle, which is nationwide?
I can't say that I have, no.
Yeah. What it is, and I just contacted and found out there is one here in Manatee County. What it is for people who want to get rid of stuff and not take it to Goodwill or any place else. You can go online with Free Cycle and list it. And for people who need stuff, they can go online to Free Cycle and see what's being offered. So it's like the like the cab company, you know, of private people. So that is a resource that some of these families might be able to use.
Thank you. I'll look into that. We do have 3 full clothing and donation closets in each of our sites for
Okay.
children and families, and we have partnerships with Goodwill and several smaller shops in our 3 county areas that give us their overage, and we're able to provide families with those things that they need for their house.
And seeing your host, I have one question for her. I'm embarrassed to say that I find out what district I'm in and who my representatives are when I go to vote. What's the quickest way to find out who they are and what district we're in before we go to vote so we can advocate with some of our representatives at the state level?
Were you asking me?
Yes.
Well, you can go online to the Florida Legislature's website. You have a computer?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just Google Florida Legislature and it'll come up. And they've got a search engine right on the that website. Yeah. Okay. I want to thank our speakers today. They have been wonderful. They have given us so much information, and we are just so overwhelmed by their dedication. They are just wonderful. Our next hot topic will be held on March 14th, and that'll be on the issue of refugees. I hope that most of you can make that one. So we thank the Bradenton Women's Club for the use of their hall, and we also thank MATV for taping this program and replaying it on their station. For the TV schedule, or to watch the program online, just go on to www.metvweb.com. And you can also see our website, lwvmanatee.org. We also encourage you to join the league. The more members we have, the more we can do to educate the public and to encourage everyone to participate in government. We have forms on the table for that if you would like. Thank you so much for coming today.